welcome to Choosing Acceptance podcast with your host, Marie Mason. I am here to share some success stories and tips on how to overcome your learning disability so that you can turn your talents into a career. And I love to inspire children and parents and teachers with learning disabilities to go beyond their limits so that they can make a bigger impact in the world. Schedule a call to become a guest on our show at calendly.com/Marie V. Mason. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Choosing Acceptance podcast with your host, Marie Mason. And we have a great show lined up for you, and you don't want to miss it. We will be sharing some great tips on how to overcome your learning disability and how to turn your talents to a career. So stick around for some advice from people who are already struggling with learning disabilities. And at the end of each episode, we're going to be sharing some great resources and how you can access them so that you can help understand your learning disability and how to grow. So our topic today is actually about myths and facts about auditory perception. So last week, we talked on our top tips about the 3 interventions that could be implemented to help students with dyslexia. And as the topic on our top tips of the week last week. And then our guest, Kalua, was able to talk about connecting to your inner guidance and gratitude. So, great topic for that Thanksgiving holiday and even into Christmas. So please watch it during the holidays because I think it's going to help you, really help you connect to your inner guidance and also help you to be grateful for your family and friends, but also how to overcome some of their negative comments. So that's a good show for you to go and refer to for stuff like that. If you're experiencing stuff in that area, definitely go there. But in today's episode, we're going to talk about myths and facts about auditory perception. So, without further ado, let's start. One of the challenges that we have with any learning disability is to know the difference between a myth and a fact. We really plan on including the common signs of what to look for. In addition, you're going to also learn their difficulties and their struggles with learning disabilities and how to overcome them, and plus some more tips. So the first part I want to address is let's define what auditory perception is, because so many people still have a misunderstanding of what it is. So it's basically auditory perception is the process of receiving, interpreting, and organizing sounds. It's the ability to recognize a broad range of sounds, as well as the concepts that are associated with them, includes success in reading and speaking. So basically, in short, when I was growing up, I had a learning disability. Okay, and I want to give you this as an example before we go to our commercial break. I would sit there and hear sentences and words and stuff like that, and I found that sometimes I misunderstood what I heard. So I would sit there and hear the word of, O-F, and it sounded like O-V. Okay, that is an interpretation of organizing the sounds example and how I was able to process that information and how I was receiving it, how I was misinterpreting it, and how I was able to hear it differently. So it was of is a letter, and it's also a consonant. So you have to understand that it's all about when you're reading and when you're trying to speak, you need to be, and writing things. It's easy to write something down sometimes, but but if you're hearing it differently, then you're going to write it and speak it and say it differently. So I heard the word of, I spelled it O-V instead of O-F. Of course, I got it wrong on the spelling test back in the elementary school years and years ago. But the point is, that's just to give you an idea that, it's easy to not hear something correctly and misinterpret it, and then you end up writing it down wrong. Well, we didn't have computers back when I was growing up in the 70s. We didn't get those until I was in high school in the 80s. So long story short, we didn't have spell check. We had electric typewriters that had spell check, but we weren't allowed to use them in elementary school. We had to do handwritten stuff. So, needless to say, spelling was not my strong suit growing up. But that's just to let you know it has a lot to do with how I receive sounds, how I interpret them, and how I organize the sounds. And that's just a really good example. And I've said it a few times before on this podcast because I really want you to understand where people are at when it comes to a learning disability, and how some of those learning disabilities can cross over into other learning disabilities too. So just keep that in mind. So they can have more than one learning disability. So before I bring up today the rest of the topic, and the speaker is myself today, Marie Mason, here is a word from one of our sponsors, and we will be right back after this commercial break. Meet Marie Mason from Charlottesville, Virginia. She is a podcast consultant for Liberty Virtual Solutions. She empowers transformation coaches who want to boost their business with podcasts by brainstorming the content and structure of their podcast. Our proven podcast roadmap will help you to develop a strategy for launching your podcast so that you can grow your business. Rebring your podcast to life at libertyvirtualsolutions.com. Welcome back to the Choosing Acceptance podcast, and with your host and speaker, Marie Mason. And in case you're just listening in for the first time, let me give you about my background, which includes being a former preschool teacher, podcast consultant, business mindset coach. I'm also an international speaker. I've spoken on several online summits, and I'm an author of a new children's book that I'm super excited about that will be shared about later. And wanted to let you know that we love to inspire students and adults with learning disabilities to go beyond their limits so that they can make a bigger impact in the world. Your voice is needed more than ever. At the end of each episode, we will share resources on how to overcome your learning disabilities so that you can turn your talents into a career. On today's topic is myths and facts about auditory perception. And hopefully you will get a much clearer picture of what it is about that particular learning disability. First question, can you dispel one of the myths about auditory perception? The myth is with people with people with this learning disability called auditory perception can't hear well. Auditory perception is a type of sensory perception. It includes the ability to hear as well as perceive the sound waves by the brain. Okay, so simple fact: some people have the difficulty with auditory perception. Learning to understand and interpret sounds is an important component of early education, as well as into adulthood. And I wanted to let you know, the earlier you can detect somebody with a learning disability of any type, the better off you can get somebody's help them, give them some resources, give them some support. The quicker it is for them to feel more confident in themselves and also be able to struggle less in school and in life, because let's face it, some of the stuff will spill into your life, depending on the severity of your learning disability. It does not have to define you. I want to make that clear. Your learning disability is just something that you have to cope with. It doesn't have to define who you are as a person. Okay? Now, topic for a whole nother today. So anyway, the second question is, how do you recognize the common signs of auditory perception? Great question. I'm sometimes getting these questions from readers, some people who have been on the show and asked me about it. In different topics will ask me some great questions. So that's where I'm getting some of these questions from. So recognizing the common signs. Let's start with the first one. One, contributing factors to success in reading is the ability to read letters correctly, and children who cannot read correctly often struggle with reading and spelling. In fact, they can't read letters correctly, makes it difficult for them to recognize words, because there are many words in the English language that have the same letter combinations, and such as tree and three. So if you're dealing with someone with an auditory perception, they hear tree and three, it could come out to be a whole different word to them. Could be me, because it's the way that they interpret the sounds. And I'm using it because with reading and writing aspects, because what we hear is sometimes what we write. Okay, because some people write phonetically, and that's what I did growing up. I wrote phonetically. Whatever I heard is what I wrote. And number two, people can recognize sounds and words when accents or volumes different. This is because the information is transmitted through the air sound waves and not through vibrations. I will be honest. Sometimes the accents are really easy to understand. Sometimes the accents are hard. And that's probably because of the language barriers in some ways, and sometimes it's auditory sound waves. The ways some cultures will pronounce certain words are different than the way the American language is, and that makes it different for that. So the next one is the connection between writing and the sound interpretation. And the creative process of writing and sound interpretation is really, really closely related. I'm not going to get into too much detail on that, but I am going to sit there and go into further challenges that people have with auditory perception. So, long story short, being able to understand like how they hear things, if they're not repeating a word correctly, that when they hear it, when they write a word differently, it's not necessarily because they have dyslexia. It's because they might have an auditory perception. So, make sure that they're hearing the sounds the way they're supposed to, before you assume it's a different learning disability, because sometimes it's really easy to not pick up on someone with auditory perception. So the next question is, what are the difficulties of auditory perception? People with auditory perception background noise can become really difficult in interpreting verbal sounds. The background noise can be a major issue for those who have hearing disabilities too. However, I don't have a just a hearing problem, but I do have a hearing disability. So the disability is very simple. It can make it difficult to interpret verbal sounds. So when I hear certain words like tree and three, and I think it's me, the word me, and I hear a very noisy background, that condition of the noisy background will distort the sounds even more. If it's a quieter room, I will probably less likely misinterpret it as easily. So it's better to have people with auditory perceptions in a quieter setting. It's much more conducive for them to be able to pay attention better to the sounds. And one of the problems with the environment is that it also can distort the sound of speech in an environment that's both background noise and echoey. So if you have like an echo in the room, echo, 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 that kind of thing, it's going to be very hard to distinguish the sounds. And people with this condition may have a hard time understanding other people's speeches and following even the simplest of directions. Difficulty with auditory perception is a common in learning disabilities. Here's something that I've learned. Keep your directions simple and clear, and do them one or two at a time. And you're going to be getting along a lot better with someone who has auditory perception. And then give them visuals too. It helps. And make sure you are front facing when you're speaking to somebody with an auditory perception. And I'll explain why, because it really helps people like myself, because I actually learned to read lips. I had to learn to read lips to see if I was hearing what I was saying, the person was saying correctly. And that was how I compensated for it. But that leads into how do you overcome learning disabilities that like auditory perception. There are many ways to manage these difficulties, which can make it easier to live with auditory perception. I am not very familiar with NLP per se for myself, but I understand through my research that it can help to manage the frustration brought on by difficulties in common communication skills and the way they are understanding the interpretation of sound, which can often be related to auditory perception difficulties. NLP has been shown to be helpful in developing communication skills and also builds their confidence levels in addressing on how an individual's sense of self-worth impacts their interpersonal relationships. It helps with their social interactions that are difficult for someone who might be perceiving what is being said and they feel like they don't fit in. Oh my gosh, I can totally relate to that because I never felt like I felt in with anybody because I was always misunderstanding what was said. I have learned to do a little more coping skills. I ask people to repeat themselves and spell things for me to make sure I'm hearing it correctly. Gave you an example at the beginning. So, I mean, there's so many different ways of how to be able to still fit in social settings, even if you feel awkward. I felt very awkward growing up. I felt like I didn't belong in my family because everyone was smart, and I was smart. I was just smart in different ways. I also had to learn to overcompensate for things that I was, lacking skills in. So I had to learn differently. That being said, here's some advice for some people who are dealing with auditory perception. it can be really helpful, like I said earlier, to read lips so you can verify what people are saying. And another tip is, like I said earlier, repeat what they said for confirmation and then check for spelling mistakes, because let's face it, when we hear a sound, sometimes it doesn't come out the way someone says it, the way we process it in our brain. So we need to be, as people with auditory perception, we need to just double check. I'll give you a really cool, funny example from work-related example, actually, that will probably have you guys laughing before the end of the show. I was writing a letter to one of my potential, wasn't going to be a client. He was going to be like a joint venture partner. His name was Shrima, and from India. And Indians generally tend to be short in the way that their height structure is. So went to go write this email, and I said, hey, Shrimp, you know how like Gmail and Google always likes to autocorrect things? Well, it went from hey, Shrima, and it read autocorrected to reading, hey, Shrimp. Imagine the response I would have gotten if I sent that letter before I proofread it. Well, now you know why I say it pays to check on your spelling. And it doesn't matter if you're turning in a paper to your teacher or if you're turning in paper into an email or a paper into your client. It isn't always 100% accurate. You're going to have to use your brain and start really learning the English language and how it's structured. Just my 2 cents, because that's been my experience with it. So thank you for all the people in my life who taught me how to read and speak English properly. Well, I have no idea what a difference that made. So next question. What are some of the resources that children who have auditory perception learning disability can find? I don't have anything specific that I know of as far as resource. Like I know I had dyslexic resource facilities that the people who own those have come on the show. You could probably contact them and they might give you some resources, like Jennifer on my first show. She was amazing. So if you ever have any need for resources, please let me know and I can hook you up with somebody that I do know. But I will give you some tips on that. For one, hearing is our most important sense, yet we take it so much for granted, don't we? And I'll give you an example. I've had somebody in my family recently had an ear infection, and it was very uncomfortable for him because it was so painful and it was hard for him to sleep. You know, imagine someone who has hearing problems all the time and how it might be difficult for them to, whether it's a learning disability or a hearing problem. Imagine what it's like with them not being able to function normally and as others as do. So don't take things for granted, just that grateful moment for there. But the next point I'm going to make is from the moment you were born, our hearing is developing as we learn to speak and recognize sounds. And while we process that information, it continues throughout our lives. And there are many ways that you can ensure that you have great hearing and that it stays in the best possible shape for life. Okay. With auditory perception, once you have it, you're stuck with it for life. You're not going to get rid of it, but you can overcome it, like I shared earlier. However, there are some resources that can be found from books, movies, television shows, and websites, and even our YouTube channel podcasts, amongst other podcasts as well. There's so many places out there. And if you go to the schools, they have resources too. So go to your local school and find out. Go to your local library. Go get some resources there. They can give you some local support that might be available. There might even be some support groups for people with that that I'm not even aware of. So please do due diligence and do your research. Okay, that's my tip for today. And I will find some resources for you guys and put them in our Facebook group, in our newsletter, and in future episodes. So if I see or hear of some great ones, if you guys know of some resources, please share them with me. I'll be happy to highlight them in our next show. Okay. So next, I have some free resources today, but in our Facebook group, and it's actually called Choosing Acceptance Facebook. And I also have a book that is on sale over at Amazon right now, and it's called Bubble Bear's Special Problem. And this book destigmatizes learning disabilities in order to provide a better understanding of their learning process. It also helps children to overcome the fear of learning disabilities so they can contribute their talents by bringing awareness to how children should be treated in and out of the classroom. All based on my 20 years of teaching experience and as one who had a learning disability growing up. So I can give you, that book is going to be giving some valuable insights. Anyone who's read it loved it. So just saying, it's really good as a supplemental in the classrooms. It's also great to have to share it with people who have learning disabilities and kids who might be struggling about opening up about their learning disabilities. That is such a great tool. Use that book to open up dialogue about how they're feeling about their learning disability. Are they being teased by it? Are they going through struggles in school that they're not bringing up to you? Use that book as a tool to open them up, because it's going to really bring some light to what's really going on, because people don't see things behind closed doors. Sometimes adults get so focused on what they see as the reaction to something, and they don't see what actually is going on in the actual situation. And that book will showcase that and help you to understand that you need to learn more about that child too. So it's a great bringing awareness book, and it's really a much needed book in this world. I will be bringing out some more books. I'm working on book number 2, and hopefully we'll have that launched in 2023. So with that, it's been a real honor to be able to share some valuable tips on helping our audience grow themselves on the Choosing Acceptance podcast. And today's topic was on myths and facts about auditory perception. I hope that you got some more valuable insights, because like I said, I put myself in the spotlight because that's what I had to grow up with. And I wanted to make sure that people understood the real definition behind auditory perception and what it is, what it isn't, and how to overcome it, and more like compensate for it. So I really want to encourage you to take advantage of our offers here on our YouTube channel. They'll be posted in the links, and the links will be posted on our YouTube channel with each video. And then you will be super glad to take advantage of a copy of my book, which is on Amazon, and also joining our Facebook group, which is, there's 2 of them. There's Bubble Bears Books membership. We also have one that's actually the Choosing Acceptance podcast on Facebook. You can catch our episodes there too. So join us for our next episode for some great tips on how to overcome your learning disabilities and achieve success. We stream on YouTube channel every week. It is not set on a specific time anymore, just because it is the holiday season that we're doing this in, and I have a really crazy schedule like everybody else. So I'm not going to give a set time, because I need to give my staff time to edit these videos and polish them up. So with that, make sure you like, share, and subscribe, and hit that notification button so you don't miss another episode. And please comment below. Let us know what your thoughts are. If, like I said, if you have any resources, I'd love to know what they are. And you can also find us on our Choosing Acceptance Facebook group. Again, just reminding you. And then until next time, I am your host, Marie Mason, saying goodbye from now for the Choosing Acceptance podcast. And you have a great week. Bye. My name is Marie Mason. I am the author of Bubble Bear Special Problem, and this book destigmatizes learning disabilities in order to provide a better understanding of their learning process. It helps children to overcome their fear of learning disabilities so that they can contribute their talents by bringing awareness to how children should be treated in and out of the classroom. If you would like more to learn about this book, then go to Amazon.com and check out Bubble Bear Special Problem by Marie Mason.